Welcome to this explainer. Right, today we're breaking down the precise legal pathways for clearing imported goods from a customs warehouse. If you're dealing with supply chains, imports, or just trying to manage corporate cash flow, understanding the nuts and bolts of the Customs Act, specifically Sections 67, 68, and 69, is absolutely crucial. We're going to take this dense legal text and decode it into structural, actionable knowledge. Let's jump in.
Okay, so picture this extremely common supply chain headache. You're an importer, right? And you only need 50 tons of rice for your immediate operations. But your overseas supplier absolutely refuses to ship such a small quantity. Or maybe the freight costs just make a small shipment totally uneconomical. So to get the rice, you're forced to order a minimum of 200 tons. Here's the huge problem. The second those 200 tons land at the port, customs duty gets assessed on the whole thing. Paying duty on 150 tons of rice that you don't even need yet? That could literally cripple your working capital.
Let's look at a specific scenario from our source material to see how this gets solved. Meet Mr. A. He's our importer stuck with 200 tons of rice when he only needs 50. Instead of just clearing the whole consignment and draining his cash flow, Mr. A uses a brilliant legal mechanism built right into the Customs Act, the customs warehouse. He basically uses it as a legal waiting room for his goods. By holding those extra 150 tons in this designated custody, he gets to completely defer paying that heavy customs duty until he actually needs to clear the goods, in smaller, more manageable lots later on. To see exactly how Mr. A pulls this off, here is our roadmap for today. First, the customs waiting room. Second, moving warehouses under Section 67. Third, home consumption under Section 68. Fourth, exporting goods under Section 69. Then we'll hit the tax implications and finish up with the final takeaway. All right, let's start with Part 1, the customs waiting room.
Before we actually start opening the exit doors, we really need to understand how goods legally enter and, more importantly, stay in this suspended state. You can't just dump your stuff in a shed and walk away, right? An importer wanting to warehouse goods has to file what's known as an into bond bill of entry, or formally a bill of entry for warehousing. The goods are assessed for customs duty right at the port of import, but, and here's the kicker, the duty isn't paid yet. Instead, the importer executes a bond. This covers the risk of that duty, plus any potential interest or penalties. Once that bond is signed and executed, the assessing officer gives the green light to deposit the goods in the warehouse, so the clock starts ticking. But your cash, it stays right there in your pocket.
Moving right along to Part 2, moving warehouses, which is governed by Section 67. Let's open door number 1. Section 67 is pretty straightforward, but it's totally essential for logistics. It legally lets you transfer goods from one warehouse to another. You aren't clearing the goods for use, you aren't sending them out of the country, you are literally just changing their physical holding location while keeping their legally warehoused status intact. That bond you signed, still active, the duty, still deferred. This gives importers massive flexibility to manage physical supply chains without accidentally triggering a tax event. Okay, Part 3. Home consumption. This is Section 68. Opening door number 2 now. Let's look at how this builds a very strict procedural chain. When our guy Mr. A is finally ready to take his 50 tons of rice to the domestic market, he has to follow these sequential steps under Section 68. First, he files a bill of entry for home consumption. You'll often hear this called an ex-bond bill of entry. Second, he has to actually pay the assessed import duty along with any applicable IGST or Integrated Goods and Services Tax and the compensation cess. Finally, only after the paperwork is perfectly filed and the cash is paid, the proper officer passes the order for clearance. Only at that exact moment do the goods legally enter the domestic economy. Now, you really want to pay attention to this critical timing rule. The Customs Act explicitly says that when warehouse goods are cleared for home consumption, the rate of duty and the tariff valuation are not, I repeat, not based on the date the goods originally hit the port. Nope. They are based entirely on the rate and valuation in force on the exact date the bill of entry for home consumption is presented for their removal. So what does this mean? If the government raises or lowers tariffs while your goods are just chilling in the warehouse, you are stuck with the new rate on the day you present your ex-bond paperwork. It's absolutely crucial for risk management.
Next up, Part 4, exporting goods, which falls under Section 69.
And finally, we reach door number 3. Think of Section 69 as the duty-free exit. If warehoused goods are exported to a place outside India, zero import duty is levied on them, assuming, of course, all the prescribed conditions are met. This is an absolute game changer for international trade hubs. Our source text highlights some really specific valid scenarios here. Goods meant for ship stores that are going to be exported, goods explicitly meant for re-export to other nations, and even supplies for duty-free shops. If you walk through door number 3, that initial import duty you bonded against, it is literally never paid.
All right, let's dive into part 5, the tax implications.
Knowing the doors is one thing, right? But understanding the financial impact is where the real business strategy actually happens. Look at this comparison. Section 68 triggers your full domestic tax liabilities. You want to sell it locally in the domestic market, you're paying the assessed duty, you're paying the IGST, and you're paying the compensation cess, the whole shebang. But look over at Section 69, the export market. It allows goods to be exported without paying that import duty. Choosing the right door and structuring your supply chain to leverage these distinct legal pathways has a direct, tangible impact on your company's bottom line.
Now, it does get a little more layered if we introduce Section 65, which deals with manufacturing and other operations inside a special warehouse. If you move goods into a Section 65 operating warehouse, by filing a bill of entry for home consumption, you might actually be eligible for exemptions from basic customs duty. But you still have to pay the IGST and the compensation cess upfront. However, here's the silver lining from the GST law. For that IGST and compensation payment, these units will generally be eligible to avail an input tax credit, or ITC. So it keeps that working capital cycle moving efficiently.
Oh, and there is this fascinating exception built into the law regarding manufacturing operations. If you're doing work on goods inside the warehouse, like processing raw materials into a finished product, and that process happens to generate waste or refuse, what happens to the duty on that waste? Well, the rule is surprisingly clear. If the final goods resulting from those operations are exported, the import duty on the quantity of warehouse goods contained in that leftover waste is actually remitted. The government essentially forgives the duty on the scrapped material, which heavily incentivizes export-focused manufacturing.
Bringing us to part 6, the final takeaway.
So we've walked through the into-bond entry, the physical warehouse transfers under Section 67, the domestic clearances of Section 68, and those duty-free exports of Section 69. As you can see, a customs warehouse is way more than just a physical storage unit. It's a highly structured, strategic financial tool. By legally deferring duty, you're protecting your cash flow. By understanding that timing rule in Section 68, you can actually manage tariff risks. And by leveraging Section 69, you can run a global export hub without carrying domestic tax burdens. So I want to leave you with a question to think about for your own supply chains. Are you actively and efficiently navigating these 3 legal pathways to truly optimize your cash flow? Or are you out there paying for 200 tons of rice when you really only need 50? Thanks so much for joining this explainer.